Get in. It's pouring. Amara Davis didn't hesitate. Clutching her baby tighter against her chest, she ducked into the black Escalade, heart racing, coat soaked through. Ezra whimpered from under the folds of her thin hoodie, his forehead burning, his breath short and raspy. Rain slammed against the windows as she sank into the leather seat, the warmth of the vehicle a sudden, disorienting relief. The man in the driver's seat didn't say a word. He reached over and quietly shut the door behind her. "Thank you," Amara breathed, not even sure if he heard her. "We're headed to Westside Free Clinic. My son, he's sick." The car's interior was immaculate dark leather, polished trim, the faint smell of cedar and cologne. Amara reached for her seatbelt, glancing briefly toward the driver for the first time. He wasn't wearing a rideshare cap, no app glowing on his dashboard. His hands rested on the wheel, strong hands, the kind you'd notice, his profile sharp under the streetlights, tailored overcoat, watch that probably cost more than her rent. His eyes met hers in the mirror, unreadable. "Ma'am." His voice was deep, even. "Who are you? And why are you in my car?" Amara blinked. "You're not my Uber?" "No," he said slowly. "I'm not." She froze, her fingers trembling as they reached for the door handle. "I'm so sorry, I thought same make, model, black SUV. License plate ends in 847. Mine ends in 874. Silence. Ezra coughed violently in her arms, his little body jerking with effort. Instinct overruled her shame as she began rubbing his back, rocking slightly. Her own embarrassment faded behind the urgency of his illness. "I'll get out," she said quickly. Complete misunderstanding. But the man turned to glance at her directly. His expression softened when he saw the child, pale, sweaty, barely holding his pacifier. "He doesn't look good." "He has a fever," she admitted. "Breathing's been bad since last night. They gave us an appointment at the free clinic. It's in 20 minutes. If we miss it," her voice cracked, "we have to wait 2 more weeks." The man checked his watch. "That's West Side, right?" She nodded, surprised. "I'm heading past there," he said. "And there's no way you're dragging a sick baby out in this weather again. Stay buckled." Amara hesitated. "Sir, you don't have to." "I know," he cut in gently. "But I want to." The Escalade slid back into traffic, windshield wipers dancing against the storm on BUP stories. Amara clutched Ezra close, heart pounding, not from fear, but from confusion. She hadn't planned on this. She hadn't planned on any of it. What a truly compassionate act. "I believe if you were in his shoes, you'd do the same, wouldn't you? Hit the like button or drop a number 9 in the comments to honor this beautiful gesture." He didn't speak much, and that suited her. The silence in the car felt respectful, protective. After a few minutes, he asked, "How old is he?" 10 months, she said. "Usually, he's all over the place, but this knocked him out." The man nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "My nephew had RSV when he was that age, hospitalized twice. My sister, well, it was a tough year." The vulnerability in his voice startled her. CEOs weren't supposed to sound like that, not that she had much experience with their kind. "I'm Amara," she offered softly. "And this is Ezra." Micah, he replied. Micah Brooks. Her heart skipped. The name wasn't unfamiliar. She'd heard it once or twice. Founder of Brooks Financial, a man who went from nothing to Forbes in a decade, a black man who built his empire quietly without scandal or spotlight. Why had he stopped for her? As if sensing her thoughts, Micah spoke again. You looked desperate, and I know that look. His words weren't pitying, just honest, real. The rain softened to a drizzle as the clinic's faded sign came into view. Micah pulled into the cracked lot, cutting the engine. Thank you, Amara said, truly meaning it. Micah turned, reaching into his coat pocket and handing her a business card. If you need a ride back, call that number. She glanced at it, confused. It wasn't the same as his company's. That's direct to me, he said. Just in case. Amara stepped out into the mist, Ezra curled against her chest like a tired kitten. She turned back to thank him again, but he was watching them both, eyes dark and far away, like he was seeing something more than just a stranger with a baby. Good luck, he said quietly. Take care of your boy. He drove off, tires splashing softly against the wet pavement. She didn't know that he'd parked around the corner 10 minutes later, or that he'd quietly entered the clinic, hands in pockets, to pay for a nebulizer she couldn't afford. She didn't know, not yet, that this wasn't the end of their encounter. It was only the beginning. The smell of antiseptic stung Amara's nose as she sat in the cramped waiting room, Ezra resting fitfully on her chest. The clinic was overrun, toddlers crying, elderly patients coughing behind masks, nurses rushing with clipboards that looked too full. But Amara was still too tired to fidget, too numb to worry. Her name was finally called. Inside the small exam room, Dr. Maria Collins, a middle-aged black woman with wise eyes and a firm voice, examined Ezra gently but thoroughly. Respiratory infection, she said, tapping her pen against the chart. We need to start a nebulizer treatment today and get him on antibiotics. It's manageable, but we can't wait. Relief washed through Amara like warm water. So, he'll be okay? With treatment, yes. Dr. Collins paused. The medication is fully covered under your assistance program, but the nebulizer machine rental requires a $65 copay. Amara's breath hitched. Her checking account had $28.61. She swallowed hard. Is there a way to delay the payment? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Dr. Collins gave her a look Amara knew too well, the one that said, "You're not the first mother to ask that today." Filled with empathy, but bound by policy. I'm sorry, the doctor said gently. Payment is required before dispensing. Nodding, Amara gathered Ezra and stepped into the hallway. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts she hadn't used in months. A neighbor might lend her 20, her old coworker maybe another 20. She did the math, came up short, and considered the emergency credit card she'd sworn never to touch again. Then she saw him. Micah Brooks, unmistakable in his overcoat and presence, stood at the reception desk, speaking softly to the nurse behind the glass. He didn't belong there, not in a clinic where the paint peeled and the chairs squeaked. But there he was, tall and steady. Amara froze, her heart thumping against Ezra's back. Why was he here? Ms. Davis, the receptionist called. Can you come here for a moment? Micah turned when she approached, his face calm, unreadable. The nebulizer and medication have been covered, the receptionist said. You're good to go. Amara stared. I can't accept that. Micah raised a hand. Consider it repayment for the awkward car ride, but it's more than that. I had a meeting after I dropped you off, he said. It went better than expected. Maybe helping someone changed my energy. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. He excused himself, stepping outside as he answered. The receptionist leaned closer and whispered, he paid for the next 3 months of rental and added a $100 credit to your account. Amara's knees nearly buckled. She walked outside, gripping the nebulizer bag like a lifeline. Micah stood near a coffee cart across the street, speaking calmly into his phone. He glanced up and waved her over when he saw her. Ezra was stirring now, a soft whimper in his throat. You didn't have to do that, she said as she reached him. I know, he replied. Coffee? She shook her head. Mr. Brooks, Micah, he corrected gently. Micah, you've already done more than anyone else would have. I can't let you pay for my child's medical treatment. We're strangers. We're not, really, he said, watching Ezra with a softness in his eyes that made her chest ache. You told me his father left, that you've been managing on your own. I respect that. She lowered her eyes. My sister was a single mom, he added. Her son had chronic bronchitis. The nebulizer made all the difference, but she struggled for years without help. I watched her carry it all alone until it broke her. His voice thickened with memory, pain. I don't want to repeat history if I can help someone now, he said. And it's not charity. You can help me, too. Amara blinked. Help you? I run a foundation tied to my firm. We're developing programs focused on healthcare for single-parent households. I need real voices, people who've lived it. We're hosting a focus group next Tuesday, 2 hours. We provide childcare. It's compensated $2.50 stipend. She stared at him, for talking, for sharing your experience, that's worth more than you know. Amara shifted Ezra in her arms. He was fully awake now, squirming. I'd have to get off work. Micah handed her a second business card, this one had a handwritten number on the back. Let me know by Friday. As Ezra coughed again, Micah's eyes flicked with concern. Do you have a way to get home? I'll call another ride, she said. He checked his watch. My next meeting got cancelled. I'll drop you. She hesitated. It's not charity, he added softly. It's just compassion. She nodded. The drive was quiet. Ezra dozed again, exhausted. As they approached Amara's neighborhood, rows of cracked sidewalks and tired buildings, her voice shrank. That's us. Brick building on the left. Micah slowed. He didn't unlock the doors immediately. This area looks familiar, he murmured, gazing at the boarded-up lot across the street. That was going to be housing for families, she said. But the project died. The developer vanished. What company? Some firm called BMG Development. The guy leading it, Deshaun Miller. Micah's body tensed. His voice dropped. What did you say? Deshaun Miller. You know him? He turned slowly, staring at her. He's your CFO, Amara said, realization dawning as her blood went cold. You know him. Micah's face darkened. That was my project, he said. It wasn't supposed to be abandoned. She felt her mouth go dry. And Deshawn, he continued, almost to himself, was supposed to oversee it. Amara's mind reeled, her grip on Ezra tightened. Micah looked back at her, voice low and clipped. Would you be willing to tell me more about him? About what happened? She nodded slowly. I can do that. But she didn't yet know Micah had only heard part of the story. The most explosive truth was still locked in her past, and it was about to come crashing into both their lives on BUP Stories. Amara didn't sleep that night. Ezra stirred in his crib, the soft hum of the nebulizer steady in the corner of their small apartment. Outside, the streetlights flickered over the cracked sidewalks of West Hollow Street, casting shadows across the walls. But inside Amara's mind, everything was moving fast, too fast, like wheels catching traction after being stuck in mud for years. Micah Brooks had recognized the name Deshawn Miller, Ezra's father, the man who disappeared the day she told him she was pregnant, the man who blocked her number, denied everything, and sent his attorney to threaten her with defamation if she ever came forward. And now he was the CFO of one of the largest financial firms in the state. Her hands shook as she pulled out the plastic storage box from under her bed. Inside was a weathered folder labeled Ezra Legal. She hadn't opened it in months. It held texts, emails, ultrasound copies, screenshots of bank transfers, all from when Deshawn still pretended to care before he vanished. The next morning, her phone buzzed. One new message from Micah Brooks. Meeting about Deshawn today at 2 p.m. Car will pick you up at 1:30. Bring documentation if you have any. Amara stared at the message, her chest tightening. Her day off was supposed to be spent doing laundry, maybe taking Ezra for some fresh air, but instead she found herself brushing off her only pair of slacks and tucking the folder into her tote. The car wasn't Micah's Escalade this time, it was a sleek black town car with a discreet driver and tinted windows. It felt like stepping into another world. By the time they pulled up to the towering glass headquarters of Brooks Financial, her palms were damp. The receptionist greeted her by name and directed her to a private elevator. The ride up was silent, surreal. Micah was waiting when the doors opened. He wore a dark gray suit today, crisp, exacting, but his expression was warm. "Thank you for coming," he said, guiding her into a side office. A woman in a tailored navy pantsuit looked up from a file. "This is Eleanor Grant, our legal counsel. She'll be taking notes." "Everything you say today will remain confidential," Eleanor assured her, "unless you choose otherwise." Amara sat, setting her tote on her lap. The folder felt like it weighed 20 pounds. For the next hour, she told them everything, the late-night texts, the whispered promises, the cold silence when she told him about Ezra, the legal threats, the voicemail where he said, "Not my problem." Eleanor's pen moved swiftly. Micah sat stone-faced, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "So," Eleanor said finally, "you have direct evidence of Mr. Miller's knowledge of the pregnancy, his refusal to acknowledge the child, and legal intimidation discouraging contact." Amara nodded. Micah slid a folder across the table. "That matches what we've been uncovering. Deshawn's been siphoning funds from several community initiatives, including the West Side Housing Project. I suspected financial irregularities, but this goes deeper. Eleanor leaned forward. With your permission, Ms. Davis, we'd like to include your statement in our investigation. This could strengthen our case and expose a pattern of personal and professional misconduct. Amara hesitated. Will it affect Ezra? No, Micah said firmly. Any paternity claim is between you and Deshawn, and we can support you if you wish to pursue it. A soft knock interrupted them. Micah's assistant stepped in, her face taut. Mr. Brooks, Mr. Miller is here for the board meeting. Security has him waiting. He's demanding to speak with you. Micah stood. Perfect. He turned to Amara. I want you to watch. There's a conference room next door with one-way glass, you won't be seen. But I think after everything he's done, you deserve to see the truth land on him. Amara didn't respond right away. Her body tensed, her mind warping under a rush of anxiety and long-buried emotion. She hadn't seen Deshawn in nearly a year. The idea of facing him, even behind glass, sent something sharp fluttering in her chest. But then she thought of Ezra, of the nights she'd cried in silence holding a fevered baby, of the bills, the absence, the shame. She nodded. The adjoining room was sterile, all chrome edges and glass walls. Through the one-way pane, she saw Micah enter a large conference space. Moments later, Deshawn Miller walked in. He was taller than she remembered, sharper, hair cropped tight, Armani suit. He moved like he owned the room until he realized he didn't. There was no one else there, just Micah. Deshawn slowed, his confidence faltering. What's going on? He asked, dropping his phone on the table. Micah didn't sit. He spoke with calm, surgical precision. You're being removed from your position, Deshawn. Effective immediately. What? Why? Micah laid down files, spreadsheets, transfers, internal memos, community development funds, housing projects, school scholarships. You've been siphoning money into shell accounts for months. Deshawn snorted. That's a stretch. You have no proof. Micah turned the laptop to face him. I have bank records. I also have testimonies, one in particular you might recognize. He leaned forward. Amara Davis. Deshawn went white. Whatever she told you, he started, but Micah cut him off. We confirmed paternity. Amara gasped behind the glass. That wasn't true, no test had been done. Micah was bluffing, but doing it with the confidence of a man who knew exactly where to strike. Deshawn's face cracked. She's lying. That baby isn't mine. DNA doesn't lie, Micah said coldly. And neither do I. IRS audits. You're finished here, Deshawn. Security entered. Deshawn surged to his feet. You're making a mistake. You think I'll go down quiet? Micah stared him down. You won't have the chance to speak once the indictments hit. As the guards escorted Deshawn out, he shouted over his shoulder, You'll regret this, Brooks. You'll regret protecting that liar. Micah's eyes followed him until the door closed. Then he turned toward the one-way glass and nodded once. In the next room, Amara sat frozen, her hands clenched around the folder of papers that suddenly seemed so small in comparison to what had just unraveled. She had just watched a powerful man fall, and she hadn't said a word. Yet somehow, It felt like the loudest moment of her life on BUP Stories. Amara stood in Micah's office, still numb from what she just witnessed through the one-way glass. The walls around her were sleek, professional, but she felt like a ghost from another world, a woman with a baby in a rundown apartment who had just watched a corporate giant fall without lifting a finger. Micah entered, closing the door behind him. His tie was slightly loosened, but his expression remained calm, purposeful. "You lied," Amara said quietly. Micah raised an eyebrow. "There's no DNA test." "You told him there was." "It was a strategic bluff," he admitted without hesitation. "But you saw his reaction." He didn't deny it, not really. He cracked. She crossed her arms. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Brooks." "I'm playing to win, Miss Davis," he said, his tone softening, "for you, for Ezra, for the dozens of families who were supposed to have homes where there's now a weed-filled lot and rotting beams." Amara dropped into a chair, exhausted. "Why are you doing all this?" Micah sat across from her. "I told you about my nephew. Remember?" She nodded. "What I didn't tell you," he continued, "was that his father walked out when the medical bills started piling up. My sister raised him alone, worked 2 jobs. I was still building this company, I helped when I could, but by the time I had real money, it was too late." He paused, looking at the framed photo on his desk, a boy with a bright smile and tired eyes. She never forgave herself. But it wasn't her fault. It was his. "Micah," Amara whispered, surprised at the pain in his voice. "When I saw you and Ezra in my car that day," he said, "something clicked. I thought I was just doing the decent thing. But when I found out Deshaun was involved," his voice tightened, "it became personal." Amara watched him for a moment, then opened her tote and pulled out the folder. "If I do decide to pursue child support and paternity confirmation, what happens next?" Micah pressed a button on his desk phone. Moments later, Eleanor entered, carrying a new set of documents. "These are the papers to initiate a paternity and support case," she said. "Given the circumstances, public misconduct, financial records, and Deshaun's recent termination, the court is likely to expedite the process." Amara took the folder, fingers grazing its smooth surface. The idea of dragging Ezra's father into court, of turning her private trauma into a legal matter, made her stomach twist. But Ezra deserved the truth. He deserved more than silence. "There's something else," Micah said. He stood and walked to a side cabinet, pulling out another set of plans, architectural drawings, full-color renderings. "The West Side Housing Project," he said. "I have recommitted the funds. The site across the street from your building will be active again within the month." Amara's eyes widened. "You're rebuilding it with updated designs, expanded childcare facilities, and community health access," he said. "It's what it should have been before Deshaun got his hands on it." She stepped closer, scanning the plans. There were colorful playgrounds, rooftop solar panels, even a garden plot. "I want to offer you one of the first family units," he said, "at a subsidized rate." Amara blinked. "What?" "And if you're willing, I'd like to offer you a position managing the childcare center." She stared at him. "Micah, I don't have credentials." "Yes, you do," he said, gently interrupting. "Eleanor ran a background check, early childhood education, 3 years at Sunshine Daycare before Ezra was born." You left because you had no one to help with him. That's not, you're qualified, he said firmly. And more than that, you understand what the community needs because you're part of it. Amara turned back to the blueprint, her throat tightening. For so long, she'd been surviving in silence. This felt like someone finally heard her. You're serious? She asked. Micah smiled, not the polished smile of a CEO, but something softer. Very. A knock came at the door. The assistant entered. Childcare Services just confirmed they can staff the focus group next Tuesday. Amara looked between the folder in her hand, the plans on the table, and the man who in just a few days had turned her entire world upside down, or maybe right side up. She nodded slowly. I'll be there. As she left the office, Ezra curled up in her arms, head resting on her shoulder. Amara stepped into the sun for the first time in what felt like years. This wasn't a rescue. It was a return to something she'd thought she'd lost, hope. 3 weeks passed like pages in the wind, swift, unexpected, full of motion. The day Amara moved into the newly completed West Side residences, she stood at the edge of the second-floor balcony with Ezra in her arms, taking in the view. The building still smelled of fresh paint and drywall dust, but for her, it smelled like beginning again. The apartment was modest, 2 bedrooms, bright windows, updated appliances, but it felt like a mansion after what she and Ezra had endured. No more roaches skittering across cracked floors, no more sleepless nights listening to screaming matches through paper-thin walls. Here, she could breathe. Micah had been true to his word. Every detail had been handled: move-in assistance, childcare support, even a grocery stipend to help her adjust until her first paycheck arrived from the childcare center, which was set to open in just a few weeks. It wasn't just a home. It was dignity. That afternoon, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Micah standing there, a gift bag in one hand, an envelope in the other. "You're early," she said, surprised. He smiled. Couldn't resist seeing the place finished. He stepped inside, his eyes sweeping the room. Sunlight pooled across the hardwood floor, Ezra's toys scattered in a corner, framed pictures of Amara's parents on a small shelf. "It's perfect," he said quietly. "You helped make it that way." Micah handed her the envelope. "Court decision came through this morning." Amara's heart stalled. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling. The first page bore the state seal, a stamped order, and the words, "Paternity confirmed, child support awarded, retroactive to birth, trust fund established." Her breath caught in her throat. "He didn't contest it," Micah said. "Didn't even show up." Amara stared at the document. The weight of it wasn't just legal, it was emotional validation after years of being ignored, gaslit, erased, proof, not just for the court, but for herself. He signed the papers, Micah added, his voice steady. Under pressure, his attorney said he didn't want a public fight. Amara let out a shaky breath. Of course, he didn't. She set the papers on the table and turned to Ezra, who sat near the window playing with a wooden toy truck. He had no idea what any of this meant, but one day he would know his mother fought, not just to survive, but to be seen. Micah handed her the gift bag next. "This is for him." Inside was a simple black frame. She pulled it out and smiled. It was a photo of Ezra taken at the community picnic the weekend before. He was standing with the help of a tiny walker, his eyes squinted in delight, cheeks round with laughter. "Turn it over," Micah said. On the back was a handwritten note, "To new beginnings and second chances." Amara's eyes stung. She set the frame beside the court papers on the kitchen counter and looked at Micah. "You keep showing up," she said softly. "Why?" He leaned against the counter, folding his arms. "Because every time I walk away, I find myself looking back," he said. "And I've learned that when that happens, maybe it's not just about helping. Maybe it's about staying." She looked down, her heart thumping in quiet recognition. "You've done enough," she whispered. Micah took a step closer. "I haven't done half of what I want to." A pause stretched between them. Ezra giggled, oblivious. Micah cleared his throat. "Next week is Ezra's first birthday, right?" She nodded. "I was thinking maybe we plan something special, just the three of us." The question hung in the air like a ripple in still water. He wasn't just talking about cake and balloons, he was asking if the door she'd closed so long ago, the one labeled trust, could ever open again. Amara didn't answer immediately. She looked at Ezra, now crawling toward Micah with outstretched arms. The baby's tiny fingers found Micah's and gripped tightly, as if he knew what his mother couldn't yet say. Micah knelt, balancing Ezra between them, one hand in hers, one in his. The silence was soft, safe. "I'd like that," she finally said. Micah looked up, his smile gentle. "Me, too." And in that moment, no contracts, no court orders, no grand promises, just one little boy and two hands holding on, Amara realized some doors don't close forever, they wait for the right knock. The morning of Ezra's birthday arrived with the sky scrubbed clean. After weeks of gray skies and drizzle, the sun had finally broken through, pouring warm light across the newly paved sidewalks of Westside residences, bouncing off the windows of the daycare center below Amara's apartment, filling her modest kitchen with golden light. Amara stood by the counter, watching the candles flicker atop a small vanilla cake, nothing fancy, just store-bought, frosted with her own careful touch, topped with a little plastic figurine of a fire truck, Ezra's latest obsession. She glanced at the clock, 10:58 a.m. Ezra had been born exactly 1 year ago at 10:59, 1 minute away from the moment that had changed everything. Micah arrived exactly on time. He wasn't in a suit today, instead, he wore jeans, a soft navy sweater, and a warmth that had become more familiar with each visit. In his arms, a wrapped box, too big to be practical, too light to be furniture. Amara raised an eyebrow. "You said nothing extravagant." He grinned. "Technically, it's very light on extravagance, heavy on meaning." Ezra clapped from his high chair, not because he understood the occasion, but because he saw Micah, and that always made him happy. Micah walked over and knelt beside the baby. "Happy birthday, little man," he whispered, letting Ezra tug on the cord of his hoodie like it was the world's best toy. Amara lit the candle, just one, just enough. "You ready?" she asked. Micah nodded. She took a deep breath and began to sing quietly, her voice shaking at first, but growing stronger with each word. Micah joined in halfway through, low and steady, until they reached the final line together. Ezra beamed, banging his hands on the tray in pure delight. Amara leaned forward and helped him blow out the candle. There was no crowd, no decorations, no party favors, just 3 people and a single flame, but it was perfect. Later, after cake and Ezra's nap, they sat on the living room floor, surrounded by wrapping paper and a few gifts from neighbors in the building. Amara opened Micah's box slowly. Inside was a photo album, hand-bound. The first page was a picture of Ezra in Micah's car, that rainy day, red cheeks, half asleep, Amara's jacket soaked through. She stared at it. "I had my assistant pull a few camera stills from traffic cams near the clinic," Micah said softly. "Hope you don't mind." Amara flipped the page. There were more photos: Ezra in the hospital room, bundled up and tired, then one from the community picnic, then from move-in day, then a candid of her and Micah laughing together outside the daycare site, each one a frozen piece of something that once felt like survival, now reborn as memory. On the final page, a handwritten message: "Sometimes the wrong car can take you exactly where you need to be." She looked up at Micah, eyes burning. "You keep giving me things I didn't know I needed," she whispered. He didn't respond right away, just took her hand gently, slowly, like asking permission. "I'm not trying to fix you, Amara," he said. "You've never been broken. I just want to walk with you if you'll let me." She stared at him, long and quiet, then nodded. And just like that, no declaration, no dramatic kiss, no thunderclap moment, something shifted. They were no longer two strangers tied together by chance, they were two people bound now by choice. Ezra stirred in his crib. Amara rose and went to him, lifting him gently, pressing her lips to his forehead. Micah stepped beside her, watching them both. "You know," he said, his voice low, "the center opens next week. We already have over 30 kids signed up." Amara smiled. "And a wait list." "Director Davis," he teased. "How does it feel to be in demand?" She laughed softly. "Terrifying. Wonderful. Real." Micah looked out the window. The lot that once held nothing but mud and broken promises now teemed with laughter, murals, small gardens. "What you built," Amara said, "it matters." "No," he said, meeting her eyes, "what we built together." The rain hadn't returned since that first day, but if it did, Amara no longer feared it. She'd weathered worse, and now she had shelter in more ways than one. Ezra cooed in her arms, reaching out a tiny hand toward Micah. Micah took it, firm and gentle. In the hush of that room, a family began, not with vows or rings, but with hands held across heartache and healing over a cake with one candle and a quiet truth between them. Some lives don't begin at birth, they begin the moment someone finally chooses to stay. The community center buzzed with energy as the evening focus group began. Folding chairs lined the newly painted walls, soft jazz playing over the speakers. On the bulletin board were posters for free prenatal classes, job training sign-ups, and a Neighbors Helping Neighbors program that Amara herself had helped create. It was the first public event since the Westside residences reopened, and Micah had insisted it be small, intimate, not another corporate rollout, but a conversation. Amara stood near the refreshment table, refilling paper cups with sweet tea, her name tag slightly crooked. Amara Davis, program coordinator. She still wasn't used to that title. As people filtered in, young mothers, an older veteran couple, two single dads from the east side, Amara greeted them, each with a warmth that came naturally. These weren't just attendees, these were her neighbors, her people. In the corner, Ezra played with a plastic stacking ring set under the watchful eye of a part-time caregiver. Every so often, he'd look around until he spotted her, then return to his game once he saw she was still there. Micah entered quietly, nodding to the receptionist and scanning the room. His eyes found Amara instantly. He wore a charcoal blazer over a black tee, casual, but undeniably put together. She gave him a small wave, which he returned with a half-smile, the kind that said, "We've come a long way." At 6:15, Micah stepped to the front, clipboard in hand. "Evening, everyone," he began, his voice carrying without needing to raise it. "I want to thank you all for being here. What we're building at Westside isn't just housing, it's community. And community starts with listening." He paused, glancing around. "Tonight isn't about presentations. It's about stories." He nodded toward Amara. She took a breath and walked to the center of the room. "My name is Amara Davis. I'm a mother, a teacher, and until recently, I was someone who thought her voice didn't matter." She looked down, then up again, her voice steadying. "Last year, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment with mold in the ceiling and a landlord who stopped fixing things once he found out I was on public assistance. I had a baby with chronic respiratory issues and 2 jobs that barely paid rent. I didn't have help. I didn't have time. And I definitely didn't have hope." A quiet fell across the room. "Then one day, during a rainstorm, I got in the wrong car." Soft chuckles rippled through the group. "That mistake," she continued, "led me here. It led me to people who listened, and not just listened, acted, because that's what justice looks like, not speeches, not handouts, action." She turned slightly, meeting Micah's eyes. "And that's what we want this center to be, a place where your story matters, where your needs aren't statistics, where your voice doesn't just echo, it lands." Applause rose, not polite, but genuine. Micah stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder, the gesture brief but grounding. The focus group unfolded slowly, people shy at first, then spilling stories of eviction notices, medical bills, school waitlists, lost dreams, and quiet triumphs. One woman, a former nurse who lost her license after a DUI, broke down recounting her struggle to get back on her feet. A teenage father shared how his own father never stayed, but he was determined to be different. Amara listened to each story like it was scripture. She didn't just nod, she took notes, asked questions, drew connections between stories and solutions. Micah watched her from the side, the way she leaned in, the way she asked the right questions without rehearsing, the way people trusted her, not because of a title, but because of presence. When the group ended, the room didn't empty immediately. People lingered, hugged, swapped numbers, a few even asked about volunteer opportunities. As the last person filtered out, Micah and Amara sat in the quiet. "You were born for this," he said. She smiled. "I wasn't born for anything, Micah, I fought for it." He nodded slowly, respect in every line of his face. "Maybe that's what makes you perfect for it." Ezra stirred in his stroller, stretching with a dramatic baby yawn. Micah glanced at the boy, then back at her. "I've been thinking about something." "Dangerous words," she teased. He chuckled. "No, seriously, I've been thinking maybe it's time the foundation had a director for family advocacy, someone who doesn't just build policy but builds trust. You wouldn't have to leave here, in fact, it would be based here." Amara blinked. "You're offering me a second job." "I'm offering you a second platform." She looked at the center around them, the community that was taking root in the soil of shared pain and stubborn hope. "I need time to think," she said honestly. "You'll have it." They stood together in the center of the room as the last lights dimmed. Ezra let out a babble in his sleep, and Amara brushed a kiss against his forehead. Micah opened the door for her. The night was crisp, the stars clear. "I still can't believe it all started with the wrong ride," she said softly. Micah smiled, locking the door behind them. "You keep saying it was the wrong ride. She turned to him. It wasn't, he said, and this time she didn't correct him. The first sign of trouble came not with a bang, but with an email. It was early Wednesday morning. Amara had just finished prepping a batch of lesson plans for the daycare's toddler class, her coffee still half full and lukewarm beside her. Ezra napped peacefully in the nursery room's quiet corner, his chest rising and falling like ocean tides. Her inbox pinged. The subject line was simple: urgent audit notice, Westside Development Funds. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. Inside was a brief but chilling message: a state investigator has launched an inquiry into the allocation of city grants for the Westside Housing Redevelopment Project. All financial records from the Brooks Foundation and its affiliates are being reviewed immediately. She read it again, then a third time. Micah. Without a moment's hesitation, she called his office. His assistant answered, voice tight. He's already in meetings all morning. It's about the audit. Amara felt her stomach drop. This wasn't just paperwork, this was the kind of language that came with headlines, subpoenas, and reputational damage. By noon, it was all over the local news. Brooks Foundation under review, allegations of mishandled city funds surface. Did a beloved community project cross legal lines? Most articles were speculative, clickbait, based on the existence of an audit, not guilt, but that didn't matter. Public opinion wasn't built on facts, it fed on suggestion. By the time Amara reached the foundation office, security had tightened. Reporters were already outside waiting with microphones and cameras. She slipped in through the side entrance, heart pounding. Micah was in the boardroom with 3 attorneys and one exhausted-looking financial officer. His jaw was clenched, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up, tie loosened but face alert. He saw her through the glass and excused himself. When the door shut behind them, she didn't waste time. What's happening? They're targeting us, he said, voice low. I've seen this before. When something good happens in a poor neighborhood, someone finds a way to try and discredit it. Is it Deshaun? Micah hesitated, then nodded. Most likely, he still has contacts in city government. He's angry, humiliated, and dangerous. Amara's fists curled at her sides. But the project's clean, everything's accounted for. Micah nodded. We know that, but audits aren't about truth, they're about shaking the tree to see if fruit falls, and while they dig, the work stops, the funding pauses, the people. He stopped himself. People start losing faith, she finished. He looked at her then, not with panic, but something deeper. You've built something real here, Amara, and that's exactly why it's under threat. They're not just coming for numbers, they're coming for you. The words hit harder than she expected because she knew he was right. That evening, as the sun set behind the row houses across the street, Amara sat on her porch steps with Ezra curled in her lap. He was fussier than usual, picking up on the tension she hadn't voiced. She bounced him gently, staring at the street lamp as it flickered on. Micah joined her without saying a word, just sat down beside her, shoulders close. They want us to panic, he said finally, to make a mistake, to prove their suspicion. But we won't, she replied. No, he agreed, we won't. A car slowed near the curb. Amara tensed inside. A man in a dark coat stared at them through the window, then the car sped off. She turned to Micah. Was that? I saw him, too, he murmured. Don't worry, he won't get close. But his voice lacked certainty, just for a second. 2 days later, Amara returned home to find her mailbox stuffed with a thick envelope inside. A formal subpoena. She was being asked to testify not just about Westside, but about her past relationship with Deshaun Miller. The next morning, As Ezra played with wooden blocks at her feet, Amara sat at the kitchen table, the document spread in front of her. Her eyes scanned the lines again and again, but all she could see was one sentence: "You are required to appear before the Special Committee on Civic Grant Oversight." Micah stood in the doorway. "I'm not letting you do this alone," he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "You knew?" "I knew it was coming." He walked over and gently placed his hand on the table beside hers. "If they want a fight," he said, "we give them one. But on our terms." She met his gaze, fierce and steady. "Then let's make sure they know exactly who they're trying to silence." And in that moment, Amara Davis, the woman who once begged at clinic counters, who rode in the wrong car, who questioned her worth, rose not as a witness, but as a force. The hearing room wasn't what Amara expected. There were no polished mahogany walls or golden plaques, just fluorescent lights, tired chairs, and a long table that divided two worlds, the question and the questioners. The air smelled of old carpet and burned coffee, and yet, it was the most important room she'd ever entered. Ezra wasn't with her. Micah had arranged childcare for the day, not just for Ezra, but for the children of other parents who were set to testify. He thought of everything, always had. But today, Amara stood alone, at least officially. Micah sat just behind her in the first row. No words passed between them, but his presence was weight, not heavy, but anchoring. A man in a blue-gray suit cleared his throat and addressed the microphone. "Miss Davis, thank you for your cooperation. Please state your name and affiliation for the record." She leaned forward. "My name is Amara Davis. I'm a program coordinator at the Westside Family Development Center and a mother." She didn't need a script. Everything she had to say was carved into her. The committee chair, a stern-looking woman with graying hair and a furrowed brow, nodded. "We are here today to determine whether public funds were misappropriated under the Brooks Foundation's Westside Initiative. Do you have first-hand knowledge of any financial misconduct?" "No," Amara said clearly, "but I have first-hand knowledge of something else, what it looks like when money does what it's meant to do." A few heads turned. "I was living in a mold-infested apartment with no heat," she continued. "I was raising a sick child alone. The clinic I relied on didn't always have medication, and no one in any office like this," she gestured slightly, "was coming to ask me what I needed. But one day," she said, voice unwavering, "a man gave me a ride, and instead of turning away when he found out I wasn't who he expected, he stayed, he listened." Micah sat frozen, jaw tight. "The West Side Project didn't give me charity, it gave me a place to live, a job that honors my experience, a space to raise my son in safety, and it gave my neighbors the same." She paused, then added, "The only fraud I've ever witnessed came from the man you've yet to subpoena, Deshaun Miller, Ezra's father, the man who left when I got pregnant, the man who stole from this city while claiming to build it." The room rustled. "Everything I've said is documented: emails, messages, legal threats, and I've submitted them all." Silence. Then the chair asked quietly, "And why testify now?" Amara inhaled. "Because I was silent for too long, and silence is expensive. It cost my dignity, it almost cost my son his health. So today, I choose to speak, not because I want to take someone down, but because I want to lift something up." She folded her hands. The truth. Outside, the news vans waited like scavengers. Amara exited through the side door into the alley, heart pounding from the adrenaline. She expected the cold to hit her. Instead, she felt steady. Micah was already waiting, leaning against the car. "You shook the room," he said, opening the passenger door for her. "I didn't shake it," she replied. "I just reminded it we exist." They drove in silence for a while, the skyline of the city passing by like an old friend. On the radio, the news recapped her testimony. Words like dignified, measured, and devastating were used. Micah's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. City Council just suspended the audit, he said. Investigation into Deshawn is now independent. The foundation's been cleared of wrongdoing. Amara exhaled so deeply she almost laughed. Then it's over. Micah shook his head. No, it's just beginning. 2 weeks later, the Westside Center opened its full slate of programs. Amara stood at the front door in a navy blue dress with a nameplate that now read, Amara Davis, Director of Family Advocacy. She didn't need to rehearse speeches anymore. Her voice had become its own compass. Ezra ran toward her, giggling, wearing his big boy helper badge behind him. Micah watched with his arms crossed, amusement and pride etched into every line of his face. I have something for you, he said as she approached. It was a small velvet box. She froze. Micah, he opened it slowly, not a ring, but a key. To the new family housing unit, he said. Top floor, sunrise view. She laughed, sudden, free, beautiful. You scared me for a second. One step at a time, he said, unless. She closed the box gently, looked up at him, and said, let's just keep walking together. And they did, through a door she had once been afraid to knock on, toward a life she no longer had to fight alone for. In the place where her silence once lived, now echoed something stronger than words, a voice, a family, a future on BUP Stories.